The Baltimore Ravens finally have their AFC divisional round opponent. Had to wait an extra day or so to find out that they'll play the Texans next Saturday at M&T Bank Stadium. By the time kickoff happens, it will have been over 4 months, 4 months and a little bit more than a week since these same two teams met in the 2023 season opener. I actually hesitate to use the word same because I think both of these clubs have changed so much since the Ravens prevailed 25-9 in week 1 that I'm not sure how much of a factor that game actually is at this point. I think there's some elements, some factors that'll remain the same, but the balance of gameplay in certain positions or certain parts of the field has changed dramatically, if you ask me, since then. Look, Baltimore's defense has cemented itself over a 17-game regular season as the best in the NFL in many categories, most important of which is league low points per game allowed. Ravens secured top spot in the AFC playoffs with a 13-4 record. I think it was Coach Evans at Sip to Tally did a video last week indicating that the Ravens had either 10 wins or had played 10 games against teams with a winning record. Lamar Jackson capped an all-pro regular season with an unbelievable performance against the Dolphins to clinch home field advantage in Week 17. The Ravens were able to rest so many starters in their Week 18 home game against the Steelers. Since that time, the other two AFC North teams to make the playoffs, the Browns and the Steelers, have each been bounced or eliminated. The Texans want to make it back-to-back wins over top NFL defense / AFC North teams after they dominated the Cleveland Browns 45-14 in their wild card home game this past Saturday. C.J. Stroud shredded the Browns defense. The Browns gave up 8.1 yards per play on Saturday. Meanwhile, the Texans didn't turn the football over at all. Houston scored on 4 of their opening 6 drives in the first half, and it really could have been 5 out of 6. C.J. Stroud and Nico Collins were unable to connect on a deep route up the right hash on a 3rd and 13 with about 9 minutes left in the second quarter. That was the Texans' 5th drive, along with their first drive, the only 2 possessions they didn't score on in the first half, other than 4 or 5 pass plays from Joe Flacco to David Njoku, one of the other tight ends, I think Harrison Bryant, and one deep comeback to Amari Cooper. The Texans dominated. I mean, they really absolutely dominated the Browns on both sides of the football to gain their first playoff win since a 22-19 win over the Bills in the 2019 playoffs. Since that time, the Texans had only won 11 regular season games, 2020, 21, and 22. But now C.J. Stroud, DeMeco Ryans, and a really fast, aggressive, and I think well-trained defense, they've won 4 out of 5 games to reach the AFC divisional round. Texans are a vastly different team, if you ask me, than the one that came to Baltimore last September, but nonetheless, I think a lot of us mentioned it after the game that the Texans were going to win a lot of football games. As it stands now, they've won 11, and it doesn't surprise me. Just look at the talent level that's on the field for them and the pedigree that they have coming from high-level college football programs with great coaching and a lot of success at the college level. It's translated to the NFL when you put them all on the same team. The Ravens also are not the same team at all. They have become a juggernaut defensively, the type of team that can confuse or alter game plans in the first quarter by the other team's offensive coordinator. And the job that Mike McDonald and those guys have done on various quarterbacks has been shocking. Stroud, however, is a guy that hasn't suffered through many of those moments at all. There was a period of time where the Texans didn't even look like they would be here in the playoffs. At one point, the Jaguars led the AFC South. In fact, they had beaten these Texans in Week 12 to reach 8-3, and it looked like the Jaguars were going to get in and be the division champs. They then dropped 3 straight games to AFC North opponents, while Houston clawed out 1 win out of 3 games without Stroud. He actually played a little bit, and the first one got hurt. I think it was a concussion. That overtime win over the Titans was huge, and then to close the year, Houston finished with wins over division opponents, the Titans again in the rematch, and then the Colts. Texans defense is really tough against the run. If you haven't watched a lot of film of them, I'll try to do multiple previews this week for this game. They're exceptional against the run from their 4-3 base. Very aggressive, fast, play downhill or play at the correct angle. I think it's going to be a challenge for the Ravens to get consistent yards on the ground against this team. Now, they did allow 227 rushing yards to the Colts in Week 18. Houston pulled out the win 23-19 on the road. But if you look at it other than that game, so just cut that game out of their most recent 7 performances, they're allowing 72 yards on the ground, dating back to that Week 12 loss to the Jags. DeMeco Ryans' group has been able to make teams one-dimensional, and that's been huge. And you saw the evidence of that against the Browns in the wild card game. The Browns generated very little consistently on the ground from normal run concepts and utilized a lot of play action that wasn't set up yet with the run game. Now, you can do it in reverse, and in fact, C.J. Stroud and those guys do. They'll often go play action before the run game's been established. I don't think their run game has been consistent over the course of the 17-game season, but Devin Singletary's had a great impact and has overtaken Dameon Pierce as a starter. I do think from some initial observations here first. The Ravens' offensive line is far better equipped to handle and win a lot of matchups in this rematch. If you recall, Ronnie Stanley and Tyler Linderbaum each got hurt in the second half and left the game. The Ravens were having trouble with pass pro early, however, particularly Stanley. I didn't think he looked great that day. Is he better now than he was then? Yes, absolutely. How much better? Enough such that he can shut down someone off that left side, whether it's Grenard or Derek Barnett, who they signed after the Eagles released him, or Will Anderson. I'm not sure. Look, the Texans' pass rush was a big factor that day. I'll try to show some end zone angle film to let people see it, to see the evidence of it. It was a big factor in getting to Lamar and holding the Ravens to only 4.6 yards per play on the day when they also lost J.K. Dobbins as well. For the day in Week 1 against the Texans defense, the Ravens had 11 possessions. We did score 4 times. We punted 5 times and had 2 turnovers. Lamar threw 1 interception, and I think there was a fumble on an exchange between him and Justice Hill, but I might be misremembering that. Look, to lose as much talent as the Ravens have, J.K. Dobbins, Mark Andrews, Keaton Mitchell, we basically played the first, I think, 3 games, maybe 4, without Ronnie Stanley and Tyler Linderbaum. To be in this position where we are is amazing. And to have it come full circle and face a Texans team that's very young and very well coached and surging, I think is a tremendous challenge. I do think the Houston Texans are capable of coming in here and beating the Ravens, even though the Ravens have been the best team in the AFC and probably the NFL for most of the year, especially if you look at how often we've led games, and we led that game wire to wire. The Ravens' run game, I think, is going to be important. I want to continue to stress that. We've made do with Gus Edwards and Justice Hill. Adding Dalvin Cook seems to provide some depth or insurance, if you will, in the event of further injury. Maybe he'll be active. Maybe it'll be Melvin Gordon. I'm not sure. I do have significant film of Dalvin Cook saved up to try to put out into a video form Tuesday for you guys to check out. To talk the Texans defense up and not recognize what the Ravens have done offensively would be folly. The Ravens finished the year 4th in the NFL at 28 points per game, and they've got a balanced way of attacking defenses. And what I mean by that is not just a run-pass balance, but a balance of how many different guys get the football. I remember watching Georgia's offense in 2021 and 2022 in terms of players moving on into the draft. Throughout the draft process, that was the first 2 drafts that I really tried to watch film of and talk about players, like a lot of content creators do. And I remember thinking how many different guys got the ball and how there were certain players who could have gotten the ball more, but it was a true spread offense. And that's what's happening here in Baltimore. That is what has occurred in 2023. So many guys get the ball. This is a true spread offense, not just from a horizontal spread in alignment, but a spreading of the football around in terms of who gets opportunities, not just on a weekly basis, but on a possession-by-possession basis. One of the biggest factors, besides the run game on both sides, for my money, will be turnovers. I firmly believe that if the Ravens do not turn the football over, they can beat anyone in the league. And when I say beat anyone in the league, I don't just mean beat them by 7 points. If the Ravens do not turn the football over offensively and play the quality of defense that they've played for most of the 17 games this year. I think they beat anybody, and I think they beat anybody by double digits. Having said that, there's elements I want to cover here in this video, and then through film study previews during the week. Feel free to add on as you guys think of other ones that I perhaps skip over or miss. Number one, the Ravens' health, especially on defense, is a big plus going into this one. Hamilton, Stevens, and Humphrey didn't play in Week 17 against the Dolphins. And then, well, Humphrey played and then went out after, I think, 2 possessions. Stevens and Hamilton did not. And then they didn't play in Week 18, got a week's rest in the wild card round, and now hopefully are fully healthy or close to 100%. Having those guys, all 3 on the field at the same time, is just so many great cover guys, great tacklers, guys that are exceptional in pursuit, make plays on the ball when they need to. In the case of Humphrey, brilliant football player, balanced against the run and the pass. I think he'll be a huge factor in this game, dealing with the physicality of Nico Collins, who I think is an amazing, huge wide receiver with a lot of downhill speed once he gets the football in his hands. That pass protection matchup that I mentioned earlier, Will Anderson, Grenard, whose name hopefully I am pronouncing correctly, and then Barnett, who they brought in. I think he's got 3.5 sacks since they signed him. That's a big matchup between the Ravens tackles and interior guys against all of them, and the interior defensive tackles for the Texans. The Texans defense, I want to do a significant preview on that. I've got about 60 first and 10 play calls saved up and categorized. So what I was looking for was, how do they line up out of their base 4-3, which is what they'll play against 21 or 12 personnel generally. What's their nickel defense look like? And then how are they going to handle our 20 personnel? Because we will put Ricard out there with 3 wide receivers, and Ricard can line up anywhere as a fullback, as a tight end, as a slot, motion from one side to the other. And if you match with your nickel defense, then there's a tremendous opportunity for us to just outmuscle you and run the football, because basically Ricard is a fullback / tight end. Many teams match up with their nickel defense against us and have suffered a difficult fate because they haven't been able to match up with our run game in those situations. C.J. Stroud, I have probably 40 or 42 passes of his that I've tried to categorize as, what's his most comfortable pass concept? What do they go to on third down? I'll tell you what, just from the film that I have and watching Saturday's overwhelming performance by him against the Browns, I think he was 16 of 21 passing. It's all of them. The dude is comfortable with everything. And to me, I remember when he came out into the draft, I think I only watched 3 games. I watched the Georgia game first, and I was like, what are people not seeing? Or what are people seeing that I'm not? And man, this dude just looks like the same guy that you saw on the field against Georgia that night in the college football Final Four. Significant factor will be Lamar Jackson's ability to extend or create plays when there are none. Now, if the Ravens' offensive line does its job, that'll only occur 2, 3, or maybe 4 times a game. Advantageous for the Ravens. Sometimes it's 6, 7, or 8 times a game. You've got more gray area in terms of the outcome of those plays. Lamar will make plays with his feet. He'll extend plays and find people down the field or find people in short passes. The Texans' defense, what they'll try to do is create 10 or 12 of those situations to cause some mistakes by Lamar or our pass pro or our receivers, running backs, whatever, and get some turnovers or some negative yardage plays. Something that I haven't mentioned that I actually think is perhaps the biggest factor in the game, and if Texans fans are listening, I really hope you're not disrespected by this, but just watching the defensive backfield talent, other than Derek Stingley, obviously, who's tremendous and very easily could have been an All-Pro, and it's fun to see him having a great year because he was a generational player his freshman year at LSU, and then through injuries and other situations, coaching staff moving on, didn't play to that level at LSU his next 2 years. And then his rookie year in the NFL drew a lot of criticism, didn't make, quote, splash or game-changing plays. Now here in his second year with the Texans, under DeMeco Ryans' defense, he's playing amazing. He's playing just like he did at LSU his freshman year and in some of those other situations thereafter where he had spectacular moments. Other than Derek Stingley, however, I'm not sure that the Texans' DB group matches up as a whole against what the Ravens can put out there as wide receiver tight end group. Not even mentioning that Mark Andrews may play in this game. Who knows how healthy he is. Probably probably makes sense for the Ravens to hold him out, but you have to win this football game. You have to win this football game to get to the AFC Championship game. I don't mean in a disrespectful way. I just think that in a man-to-man situation, the safeties and nickel defenders that the Texans put on the field do not look like the type of guys that are going to match up well with our receivers and our tight ends because we have so many who can impact the game. I'm not talking about pure man-to-man defense. I'm saying whether it's quarters, whether it's cover two, whether it's man, our guys have shown the ability to beat people in tight space, down the field, to the sideline, in the middle of the field, consistently, and it's a different player every week or a different player on each possession. The Ravens truly remind me of an NBA team with 7 guys who score between 12 and 18 points per game. I'm not thinking of a good example of that right now, but they have so many guys who can affect the passing game when they're all healthy, which they all appear to be right now, except for Mark Andrews. I think that matchup of the Texans DBs against the Ravens wide receiver tight end group is one that looks like it's in our favor to me right now, and I could certainly end up being wrong. Now, having said all that, look, if the Ravens can't pass pro the Texans pass rush, then that advantage, if you agree with me, if you consider it a 65-35 advantage or 60-40, it becomes 52-48 or maybe 50-50 if the Ravens can't pass pro consistently. The run game element, I think, is always a huge factor, but that matchup of the Ravens wide receivers, tight ends against the Texans DB group down the field, to the sidelines, but particularly to the boundary, I think is going to be one that will impact the Texans' defensive strategy as the game develops. Meaning, if the Ravens are able to win some of those early matchups, they can dissuade the Texans from playing certain coverages, limit their coverage call sheet, basically, such that Todd Monken and Lamar Jackson kind of know what's coming. But I'm getting ahead of myself there. This is just my reaction to the Steelers losing and it being final, that the Ravens are going to host the Texans in the divisional round. A truly great matchup, if you ask me. A young, generational type talent in C.J. Stroud going against someone in Lamar Jackson who's already gone through that ascendance with his 2019 MVP award and probably should win one for this year as well. Appreciate you guys' time, man. Let me know what you think of my first reaction to the game being finalized or set in stone now. We had to wait an extra day for the Steelers to lose to the Bills. But credit to the Steelers for making it that far. But it's good to know, for me at least, that we're going to be taking on someone that's not an AFC North opponent. I think no matter who you're going to play in the division round, you're going to play someone with a lot of talent. And certainly the 4 teams that are left in the AFC, the Ravens, Texans, Bills, and Chiefs, are all 4 full of talent on both sides of the field, both sides of the ball, that can make game-changing plays. Appreciate you guys' time. If you think other Ravens fans would enjoy this quick little preview, commentary-style preview of the Ravens-Texans matchup in the division round on Saturday, then please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media to help other Ravens fans enjoy it as well.